If you're trying to conceive and feeling overwhelmed with fertility advice, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to Don't Tell Me to Relax, your fertility podcast and antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm Hannah, a fertility acupuncturist, teacher and campaigner for better fertility education. This podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex ed at school, with the aim of improving your understanding of your reproductive health and optimizing your fertility. Hello everybody and welcome back to this week's episode. This week I am joined by Giulietta Durante, who is a nutritional therapist who specializes in hormone health. And I asked Giulietta to come on because we have worked together, because she has helped me, because as I approached 50, I decided I was going to do some investigations into my own health. And obviously, being perimenopausal, one of the things I wanted to look at was taking HRT, my hormones, where they were at. And so Giulietta very kindly helped me do what's called the Dutch test. And I have to say, it was one of the best things I ever did. And, I've hit 50 feeling really good. And a lot of it is down to having a really good understanding of where my hormones are at and a really good support plan that you gave me, Giulietta. So before we get into all of that, because what I wanted to do was kind of apply that knowledge to a fertility case, because it really reminded me how important that was, understanding hormones from a fertility perspective. But before we do all of that, would you like to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your background?
Yes. So first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to have this little chat, and thank you for your really kind words. It was such a pleasure to be able to support you with getting that clarity on your hormones. And I think that's pretty much the core of what I do. It's like empowering people to understand their hormone health in a way that potentially where you maybe sit in a clinic with a doctor, you're not going to get that clarity. I believe we all have a right to know what's going on. And that's one of my driving factors is, whether we go to see a doctor and we're told there's nothing wrong with you, or we get told actually there's something up. My real reason for doing this is, well, why and what's happening and what does that mean for me and how can I support myself and what can I do going forward? What does this mean for what's happened in the past? Really having that holistic view of hormones. I mean, yes, I am a nutritionist, so all the training that I've had is how to use food to support hormones and supplements, but it is wider than that, and I love this kind of deeper dive, and I love looking at lifestyle. I love looking at beliefs and mindsets, and just really, it is about that. It's like, let's get as much information as we can. Let me educate you on it, because I believe it doesn't matter whether you've ever studied science in your life. We all have the capacity to learn and understand about our hormones. And that's really my real driving thing. I'm always like, I say to my clients, I'm a bit of a detective, because I'm always like, but why? Why? Like, being in my head sometimes is not fun, because I'm always like, but why?
Yeah.
Why? What's the cause? And I'm a bit relentless and become a bit obsessive potentially, but in a good way.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's worse things to be obsessed about, and it's really, I really like your word empowering, because that is definitely how I felt having worked with you, and after we finished our work together, because I felt like I had a really good understanding of what was happening, and then it
Yes.
enabled me to know what it was that I needed to do. And
Yes.
I work in this area. I feel like I'm really quite well informed, but I have to say I learned so much, and it did make me feel much more in control of where I'm at in my life and what the things that I need to do. And so I think that word empowering is a really good one, and it applies, doesn't it, whether you are a teenager just starting your periods, whether you're coming off contraception, whether you're trying to conceive, going through the perimenopause, kind of feeling in control and knowing what is happening for yourself is a really important part of that change in that process.
Absolutely. And I think this word control is very important, because hormones can sometimes make us feel very out of control, right? For many
Yeah.
reasons. Like you say, all these hormonal life stages you've described, first periods can be very challenging. The first few years of like teen periods can they're settling down. So there can be a lot of like this feeling of lack of control. Equally, trying to conceive, there can be a total lack of feeling of control. So, I think we've got this, like, if you can look at this sense, this idea of control, at least by understanding what's going on, we can regain a sense of control. We may not be able to fully be able to harness our hormones in the way we want, but at least understanding what's going on, I believe, is a huge part of this picture. And really, when you have those moments where you're like, oh, that makes total sense, you almost redefine your relationship with your body and your hormones, and you just feel so much more, again, in control, right? Like, and it's, of course, we can't always be fully in control, but it does give us a sense of, at least I know what's going on now. That is the empowerment part.
Yeah, and so Giulietta, can you tell us a bit about the Dutch? Because lots of people don't necessarily know about it. It's not something that's kind of in the
Mm.
mainstream. So can you tell us about the Dutch test, what it stands for? Because I always forget. I get dried
Yeah.
urine, and then my brain kind of I go dried urine, something, something, something. So
Do you know what? I
tell us.
always forget as well. Like I've been doing this for years, and it's not a logical one. The
And
first thing I always start by saying is actually it's nothing to do with Holland, because the first thing is you hear Dutch and you're like, I'm not going to tell you to go to Amsterdam. Like, okay,
yeah,
don't worry about that. It's dried urine. Well, we might even have to Google it because I can't remember for comprehensive hormones, but I can never remember the T.
what
Uh,
about dried urine test for comprehensive hormones?
I think that's it. Dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. I mean,
We
no
got
offense,
there.
Dutch, but not a great one really. But never mind. But so let me just give you an overview. Like, it's a urine test, right? So from the word go, this is a test that so many people can do easily at home. So you're already cutting out these issues with going somewhere, getting your bloods done. For some people, getting blood tests is highly traumatic. I'm one of these people. Very difficult to draw blood from me, so it's always horrendous. You can do this at home easily with a very little guidance. And, obviously people will say to you, oh, blood tests or serum tests are the gold standard, and nobody's arguing with that. But the thing about blood tests is they provide you with a snapshot of what's happening there and then in the moment. What I like about the Dutch test is you take at least 4 samples, right? So you can already see there's a bit more like, oh, let's step back and look at a slightly bigger picture, because hormone levels change pretty much hour by hour. So the Dutch test is thinking about this side of things. Like, let's step back, let's look at a more comprehensive picture. The great thing about it as well is these urine samples. So basically all you do is you wee in a little pot, you stick a little stick in, dry it for 24 hours, pop it in an envelope, and that's it, you're done. The samples are very stable. So if there's any challenges, you just pop them in the freezer, you pick it up again. Like, there's a real flexibility about it. Because I find a lot of people are very anxious about taking samples and things. So this is like, you've got a bit more flexibility. Um, it's also a much more in-depth picture, because the Dutch test doesn't just look at like an overall level. It looks at breakdown products, what we call metabolites. And it's like, like the first bit is like almost like that first photograph. And then the second one is like that zoom lens into something a bit deeper. So it just gives you this really beautiful overall picture of what's going on. And it's not just looking at, for example, what's happening with your estrogen and your progesterone. It takes into account your adrenal health, which is huge, right? Like, that's like the pyramid. If you look at a pyramid of hormone health, the adrenals are at that baseline. So it gives us a picture of what's happening with your adrenals. It can also give us like pick up stuff that maybe we're not feeling yet, but we can see. It's almost like looking into the future. It's a little bit of like, well, what happened in the past? What are your reserves like? I love it because, for example, I've talked about estrogen. It doesn't just measure your E2, your estradiol, which is like the common one measured in a blood test. It measures all your primary estrogens. We have 3 main primary estrogens, which, when you first find this out, you're like, what? I didn't even know this was a thing, It shows you how your liver breaks them down, which is fascinating, because you might be talking to someone and it sounds like they have really high estrogen, but actually what they do have is very, very slow estrogen clearance. And they are 2 very different things, and they need to be dealt with differently. But that's something that a blood test won't show you. It looks at, for example, for all those PCOS people listening out there. I know PCOS and fertility, big, big theme here. Sometimes PCOS blood tests, they won't pick everything up, but this looks at testosterone metabolites, and you can do a lot of very targeted interventions there. So I can go through every marker in detail. I don't think that, your listeners want to hear me geeking out to that level, but it's just this beautiful overall in-depth picture of hormone health, easy to test, little hassle, and just gives us so much information.
And so I guess what you're saying is, let's, because lots of people we work with and lots of people listening to this will be probably doing like the day 3 blood tests. They'll be
Mm,
checking their estrogen, they'll be checking their FSH, their
yeah.
LH, and then they'll be looking at their progesterone on day 21. That's like the
Mhm.
standard kind of testing that we do for hormones. So what
Yes.
you're saying is that this Dutch test goes into that in much more detail.
It does go into it in much more detail. You're still measuring. If you're going to sort of like equate it to one of those tests, it's closer to that day 21 test, right? Because one of the biggest challenges of the Dutch test is we want to catch you about 7 to 10 days after ovulation so we can measure that progesterone peak. Now, I mean, that's a whole other topic because, people doing this test need to be tracking their cycle in some way. They need to kind of know, and that can be a little bit of a challenge. But so what we're measuring, there are different types of Dutch tests as well. We're talking about the Dutch Complete, which is your standard one, the one that you did.
Mm.
Um, and one of the challenges is making sure, the client has ovulated and that we're catching that progesterone peak. But everything we're measuring is that mid luteal kind of phase. So at least we have this really lovely reference range. I don't know about you, but I get so many clients who are like, oh yeah, I had a hormone blood test done. I'm like, okay, what day did you get it done? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And it's like, oh, like
Yeah, often done on the wrong day.
on the wrong day. And I'm like, what a waste of money. Let's put this money into getting NHS Dutch tests,
Wouldn't that be amazing?
That would
And
be amazing, yeah.
so what kind of signs and symptoms would make you think, not fertility with this question, but kind of generally, what signs and symptoms do people come into your clinic with that makes you think, we need to test, we need to do a Dutch test to find out what's going on here?
So many, I get people who potentially have come off the pill and are very irregular or maybe even not having cycles at all. There is an add-on that you can do a cycle map. So you basically can take samples for an entire month so we can see what's happening, a bit like some fertility trackers as well. Um, PMS is one I get very, very regularly. Very, very challenging luteal phases, challenging ovulations, like that happens quite a bit. And it's interesting because, I mean, a lot of my clients read a lot, research a lot, and they'll come and they'll be like, oh, I think my estrogen is really, really high. And then we test, and it's the actual complete opposite. Estrogen is on the floor, but it's not being detoxified, So we're talking about a lot of polycystic ovary patients as well, wanting to be able to understand and support themselves a little bit deeper, endometriosis, adenomyosis, all of these things. There's a lot of support we can offer. Even a perimenopausal, like what's going on? How can I support myself? People like yourself, on this cusp between perimenopause and menopause, like that's a great time to do a Dutch test. It's almost like a bit of a looking mirror ball, crystal ball, isn't it? And going, all right, what's going to happen in your future? So it can be used for so many things. Clients who just want to optimize sometimes, and sometimes it's what I said before. People who've sat in a consultation room with a doctor and they've been told there's absolutely nothing wrong with you, but they have this niggling sensation that there are challenges, and they just want to get that information.
And you just sort of sparked something in my brain then, because we hear a lot on Instagram and all these sort of places around estrogen dominance and estrogen
Mm.
excess, and it's linked to PMS and lots of kind of hormonal health problems. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think there's quite a bit of like confusion about what that actually means and why it's an issue.
Yes. So, estrogen dominance is a term taken to mean when you have more estrogen in relation to your progesterone. But the thing is, it gets bandied about so much that I think most of us are like, "Oh, I've got that," because you look at the symptoms and you're like, "Oh, I've definitely got that," and it can lead to taking supplements without any guidance, without any support, and some supplements that potentially could make you worse. Like one of the big ones is DIM. Some of the people listening may have heard this. It's an extract from broccoli. DIM is a great estrogen detoxifier, but if your primary estrogens are low, all that's going to do is drag them down even lower and make you feel even worse. So actually, the Dutch test is a great one for assessing where you are on that. I like to think of it as a spectrum, the estrogen dominance spectrum. You can be on one end or on the other, because we have to see what your progesterone is doing. Some quite often, for example, with PCOS, some clients have super, super high estrogen, but super, super, super high progesterone, in which case that's not strictly speaking estrogen dominance. That's just
Mm,
very, very ramped up hormone production. And it's really important to look at the subtleties of all of this. And that's why this kind of testing is really, really valuable. Another issue around estrogen dominance is I've talked about the metabolites, the breakdown products of estrogen. They're very important too, because some of the breakdown products are really, really strong estrogens, and they
mm,
could manifest as having a lot of estrogen, but actually it's a detoxification issue. It's not that you produce a lot of estrogen. So this is where the detective comes in, and I'm like, aha, now we really, really know what this means. And I would say probably a very high percentage of anyone with a period is going to be a little bit estrogen dominant, just because of all the estrogens in the environment, and everything else. 100%. But sometimes we can be a bit too gung-ho and go in like with crazy sort of supplements, and we'll read stuff and be like, oh, I'll do that. And it's just really useful to understand what type of estrogen dominance you have, and where are you on that spectrum, and what targeted support do you need for you.
mm. And so from a fertility, so for somebody who's trying to conceive, what kind of information would you get from the Dutch
Yeah.
test? What kind of things could it help you support with your fertility?
So many. And I think let's circle back first of all to your adrenal health.
Mhm.
Don't tell me to relax, isn't it? Like this is like, don't, like, this is just chill out, go on holiday, go and have a baby. It's like, oh, and actually that I think that the Dutch test is a fabulous tool for assessing overall adrenal health, because it doesn't just look at just your free cortisol, so your main like long-term stress hormone. It looks at what the pattern is throughout an entire day. And that's really, really important, because we're meant to be producing cortisol as we wake. It has to peak mid-morning, and then it comes down in the evening and we relax. That alone is invaluable. That can
Mm.
tell me so, so, so much. I think I remember when we looked at yours, if you don't mind me sharing, yours was
Oh,
like a little bit, and it's interesting. It's like, oh, this is something we need to work on. We need to really fire up these adrenals,
mm,
because obviously those adrenal hormones have a knock-on effect on everything. The Dutch also looks at DHEA, which is a master hormone when it comes to not just cortisol production, but also progesterone, a key fertility hormone. And it's almost just like we can really assess where you are. How much fuel have you got in your tank? Are you close to just burning out, or are you firing on all cylinders, but deep down you need deeper support? So that's like a really lovely way. And it's way better than just saying, oh, just go and relax, go and drink
mm.
a glass of wine and just, go with the flow, which this is
Yeah.
like, actionable, really, really kind of deep assessment of where you are. And then obviously there's all the other factors, like there's nutritional markers, your B12, your B6, all of these markers that come at the end of the test. These are all nutrients that are so important for fertility. And because they're measured in urine, they're telling me how your body is using them, and not just, oh, you had loads of B12 in your blood at that moment in time. Great, but are you even using this B12? How is your B6, etc.? Um, and it also gives us a great sort of indication of estrogen detox, progesterone as well. It's for fertility. I think it's like the bloods are great. And, wanting to talk about, for example, I quite often get people who have an AMH test and they contact me and they're like, oh, I've been told that my ovaries are age 100. What do I do? And I'm like, right, well, let's now look at the bigger picture. Let's look at your overall hormone health, because actually you may not be in the state that you think you are, So it just gives you this much more like multi-dimensional view for fertility. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what's interesting, isn't it, it from the Dutch is that, and tell me if I'm wrong, but what you can see is this interaction of stress hormones and reproductive hormones, and how the two
Yes.
influence each other. Because obviously, we do know that there is an impact, isn't there? Like if you're one of those people who's tired in the morning and then you can't sleep at night, that is going to have a knock-on effect to your reproductive hormones and your menstrual cycle, and therefore it could have an impact on your fertility. And when you see it all in black and white, it's quite telling, isn't it? That, okay, this is why because so many people we work with can't get themselves up in the morning, get themselves going, firing all
Yeah,
day, and then they get into bed at night and they can't go to sleep. And that's like that cortisol imbalance that you were referring to, and how that
yeah.
interplays then with your hormones. It's really interesting when you see it all laid out in black and white.
Yeah, and because I think sometimes focusing on the reproductive hormones shouldn't be the primary focus. Actually,
Yeah,
let's get those adrenals really happy. Let's let your body know it's safe. Let's have the ability to wind down, and then let's think about. And sometimes you don't even need to focus on the reproductive hormones after that. It almost
yeah,
just happens as a beautiful cascade. So I love that
yeah,
description that you've said, that intersection between adrenal stress hormones and reproductive ones really gives you a
yeah.
beautiful picture. Mm.
And I think what I found, this is just my personal opinion. What I found was that, it's very easy, isn't it, when you're a woman and you're busy and you're getting on with stuff, that you just go, "Oh, I'm all right, I'm all right, I'm all right." You just go, you just crack on with stuff. And it was really good for me to see what my body was doing in black and white, because it was
Yeah.
not a wake up call, but it was a bit like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, yeah, I do need to do something about that," because you can just put it to the bottom of your sort of and you just we just go on and on and on, we carry on, and that's kind of the way we go through life. And so just to see it and see this is how your body is like, oh, okay, so I definitely need to do something about this. and
Yeah.
and that in itself, because often people, I tell you what it is that, and I know this because this is me. If somebody said to me, "Are you a stressed person?" I would say, "No, not at all, because I don't feel stressed." But then, I looked at my results and I was like, "Oh yeah, my adrenals are really not very happy." So, they are clearly mopping up that stress somewhere. And I think that is the thing, isn't it? That we often are not in touch with how stressed we actually are because we're so bloody busy all the time.
Absolutely. And the body actually sometimes, at certain points of stress can feel very good.
Yeah.
You've
Oh, I
got those
love
stress
that. Yeah.
hormones,
Yeah.
you've got that cortisol. Cortisol, if in like a nice level, actually feels really good, but it's the depletion that's happening underneath. And it's
Mhm.
all the narratives in society, around keeping going and busy mom and having it all and all of this stuff. And, what
Mm.
I always say is like the Dutch never lies. It's
Yes.
all there. And it can be quite confronting sometimes. I do a Dutch on myself every year or two just to check in. And, I've had some real wake up calls, like around my phone use, for example, was one of them. I was on my phone at night and that cortisol was not going down. And I was like,
Mm.
oh dear. And
Mm.
like you say, it really forces you, not forces you, but it really invites you to get honest with yourself.
Yes.
And it's really helpful because you can put things in place way, way, way before you end up in a point, not of no return, but a really sticky, tired, exhausted point.
Yeah. Which is much harder, obviously, to get yourself back from, isn't it? When everything's kind of really on the floor. Like you say, it's like a sort of a bit of a wake up call of, which direction your body is heading in.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Mm.
Yeah. So in terms of like when you get your results back, what I mean, I guess what you're going to say is like, because what my question is, what do you do once you get your results? Like, how do you fix things?
So obviously the results are back. I interpret them. I have a deep look at them. I usually also consult the team. They've got a team of wonderful naturopathic functional doctors in the US. We have a chat. I've been doing this a long time, so it doesn't take me long to go boop, boop, boop. And then we sit down, we have a call, and I walk you through your results a bit like we did. I
Mm.
really want you to understand. I really want you to walk away and go, I get it. So I explain what everything means, and then I explain the main things. Sometimes it's just a question of like, well, let's just focus on one thing. It depends on the person's capacity to do things. Other times people are like, I want to do all of the things, but I explain what we need to prioritize. And then I explained potentially what foods we want to be thinking about, what supplements we want to be doing, lifestyle choices. Sometimes it's just that one little thing, like I've said, the phone use. Like if I see your cortisol is shooting up at night, it's like, we need to get this phone in another room. Literally, that's the first thing that he's doing. With the estrogen pathways, it's certain food. Sometimes it's like we need to increase your broccolis, your cauliflowers, all of this thing. Sometimes we just need to put in a really good protein shake because you're just not eating enough. And I can see your adrenals are really depleted. So it really depends. And that's where I suppose it's an art of interpretation, pulling in the science, pulling in the research, and then deciding what are the sort of priorities. But there's so much we can do with this. Like I sometimes with clients, we will spend about 6 months putting things in place, really slowly, gently over time. And I love it because and I find it really helps to motivate clients because they know why they have to eat the broccoli. I'm not just telling you randomly eat the broccoli. Like I'm telling you because there's this pathway in you that needs broccoli. And it's like,
Mm.
I really notice a difference. Clients are like, oh, I'm really motivated now. I know that I need to do it and I know why I'm doing it. So, and the supplements as well. I mean, I'm sure you come across people all the time who have cupboards full of potions and lotions and protein shakes, and no one knows why they're taking it. And this is like,
Mm.
right, these are the supplements you need to take for now. That's it. And it just gives clarity and it gives direction and motivation.
Yeah, I have to say, having spent a long time taking every single supplement because I've been influenced by something on Instagram usually, and now I think it's probably been about 3 months, isn't it? 4 months since we had
Hmm.
our call. I've been on the program that you gave me, and I genuinely do feel. I mean, if you'd have asked me, I wouldn't have said that I felt bad, but now I feel like really good. And,
Yes.
I feel like I know what I'm doing. I know what I need to do. I know what is right or wrong. I mean, whether I make those choices or not, that is another episode. But like the base sort of framework of like, what I need to be doing, what supplements I need to be taking, where I need to be focusing my eating, just kind of like slowing down a bit and all of those kind of
Yes.
things. It definitely does feel very targeted and specific. That's the thing, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
it's very easy to just kind of think one size fits all, and it absolutely doesn't when it comes to hormones. We're all completely unique and we all need different things at different stages.
Absolutely. And I remember, again, if you don't mind me sharing, and it's something I see a lot, is the intermittent fasting coffee kind of thing. I see that a lot. Everyone is like, oh, I'm doing this sort of bulletproof coffee in the morning, but I'm putting in collagen because I want a fasting window. I'm actually buzzing half the day. It feels amazing. And then we look at the Dutch, and I'm just like, maybe not. Like,
Yeah,
but it gives you clarity because
yeah,
I might get a Dutch test and I'll be like, do you know what? Your adrenals can handle it. Knock yourself out. Have a fasting window. I mean, it's very rare because I don't believe that works very well for hormones in general. But when you get the Dutch, there is like evidence, right? It's like this is not working for your results. So let's
yeah,
shift it. And like you say, I love what you say. You didn't feel that really. You felt fine. But now with these tweaks, it's like, oh, just
yeah,
up leveling a bit, and just like, oh, right, okay, I get it. Yeah.
yeah. I feel like I've got a more solid foundation is how I would describe it. I feel a bit more
Yes.
resilient, I think is
Mm.
the word, which is not bad for January, is it really?
No, that's really impressive.
So, before we finish off, it would be great to hear from you. Like, what are the top things? Because there's so much information out there. But what, in your opinion, what are the like, let's say, top three or top five things that throw people's hormones off? Like, what do we
Mm.
do? Coffee and fasting in the morning, I think, might be one of them. What other things do you see a lot that people do that they might not realize could have an impact on their hormones?
Yes. So I will say, obviously, this is being recorded in January. So I just want to reiterate, please don't follow the intermittent fasting coffee like stuff that's going around at the moment. Please, please, please nourish yourself with a decent breakfast. I will say, second of all, nothing to do with nutrition, phone use,
Mm,
like we even before we get because our nutrition is important. But what I'm finding is a lot of clients will say to me, I don't have time to cook. And it's like, okay, this is interesting. Where is this time? I once remember reading a great question, which was like, well, who has your time? Where is it
mm,
gone? And of course,
mm.
it can be work and this and that, but quite often it's phone use. So I find that just really getting honest with ourselves about our phone use can be a really, really powerful one. It opens up more time to cook, to prepare. I'm not telling you have to spend hours in the kitchen every day, but half an hour of planning on a Sunday is going to set you up for the rest of the week, doing an online shop, etc. So I would say phone use is a big, 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 big one. Um, what else would I say? What other things do I see people? Again, it's not really nutrition based, but move a little bit, like get out there, move every day. If you can move first thing in the morning and get a bit of daylight, that is like the cheapest way to reset your hormones. And I know this is not easy in January. But you don't need sunlight. You just need daylight. Now
Mm.
let's do a nutrition one because I am, after all, a nutritionist. But protein. Let's eat plenty of protein to feed our hormones. And let's really, again, I'm not anti plant based, I'm not anti anything, but I think sometimes we can get a little bit like, oh, the plant based story and just like going down the vegan route without really thinking about our protein. Protein is key to hormone production, but also to blood sugar balancing. And if you have plenty of good quality protein, that is the number one way to support your hormones. So I think that's a big one. Another one probably that people, is being honest about your alcohol consumption. I'm not here to tell you not to drink. I'm sort of ex-party girl here, absolutely. But especially if you've got hormonal challenges, it's just such a toxic compound, and it clogs up the pathways which we detoxify hormones, and I've sat in many calls with clients and they're just not improving, and it's because the alcohol consumption isn't changing. And we have to have very brutally honest conversations, which is like, your PMS is never going to get better if every weekend you throw what's potentially, liters and liters of a very toxic substance that block your hormone sort of detox. So I would say those are kind of ones to be thinking about, and getting honest about. And you can start really, really, really small, really small. Just put your phone on airplane mode from a certain time. Put it in another room. That's the best one, right? Because otherwise, before you know it, you're like, oh, online again. And with the alcohol, just start exploring what it would be like to get to an event and not have a drink immediately. Have a sparkling water and then have a drink. We're not going for perfection. Who wants that anyway? But just little shifts can make such a difference.
Yeah, yeah, that's so useful, because it's not about you can't do anything, but it's the small steps, isn't it, that can make a big difference, I think.
They really can. And something that I really love thinking about is, what message are you sending yourself and your body when
Mm,
you do these little things?
mm,
We're always subconsciously influencing our thoughts and our behaviors and our hormones. Like the power of, like I said, going to an event and going, I'm really proud of myself because I had 2 glasses of Prosecco and 2 glasses of sparkling water. And that is a massive achievement. And that itself is going to really help sort of like shift that hormonal cascade, because you've got this sense of, I am doing something for myself. And instead of this like, oh, I'm a failure because I drank whatever, it's like, no,
mm,
I'm showing up for myself. And that's a really big part of hormone health.
absolutely. I mean, I could literally sit and talk about this all day because it is so fascinating, and I'm definitely going to do the Dutch again, maybe next year. I don't know. We'll
Mm.
see how things go this year, but it was a game changer for me. It really was. So I guess if anybody wants to find out more about it, then they can contact you directly. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can drop me an email, go to my website, which I'm sure will be in the show notes,
Yeah,
or send me a DM on Instagram as well. I'm
yeah,
always happy to hear from you. We jump on a
yeah.
call, we explore which Dutch test would be best for you, we explain how to support you, all of those things. Yeah, I'm here. I mean, I keep on thinking, how can I like streamline the system so like thousands, hundreds of thousands of women can do the Dutch test at one time.
It would be good, wouldn't it? Especially, I mean, for anybody, but I do think, I keep saying to all my mates who are all on HRT and, all going through it at the moment, like, do the Dutch, do the Dutch. So, yeah,
Mm.
it would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, imagine if every 5 years in the NHS, instead of the silly like message you get for a crappy health check that isn't going to do anything, you get a text message saying you are due your Dutch test. Oh, can you imagine?
Oh, it would be so good. It would be so good. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely to chat. I will put all your details on the show notes. So if anyone wants any more information, they can find out where to find you on there. So thanks everybody for listening. I hope it's been helpful as always. And we will see you next time. If you've enjoyed listening to this and want to find out more, then come and join my free community in Facebook. We have loads of resources. You can catch up on all our previous webinars and be the first to know about forthcoming events. To sign up, just follow the link in the show notes. And if you'd like to work one-to-one with myself or one of the team, then please see our website, hannahpern.com, where you can book in directly or organise a discovery call to find out how we can support your fertility and your reproductive health.